Hi there, I'm your host, John Ivison, and this week I'm joined by the MP for Thornhill, Melissa Lantsman, who is also the Deputy Leader of the Conservative Party. Melissa, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, John.
So we've known each other a long time. Since you were a 20-something communications director, you were working for Lawrence Cannon at Foreign Affairs in 2008. I think you worked on the 2008 campaign. Did you ever foresee that you would make the transition to elected member?
Yeah, I thought one day I would do it, and that was after a number of years of being a staffer, but hopefully we had a good working relationship then, and I answered your questions, and I'll do the same now.
I certainly hope so. A little bit about your journey through the party and then a bit more about where the party might go. I think it feels like a pretty momentous time in Canadian politics. So you grew up in your riding. You were the daughter of Russian speakers who moved from Ukraine. How did that conflict affect them? How's it affected you?
Well, I grew up in a house of with parents who moved here in the 70s from at the time was the Soviet Union. And being Russian speakers in Ukraine and leaving because of, I think, the persecution of them because of their religion. I grew up with not such great stories about their childhood and their teenage years, and they chose Canada to do everything possible to give us a better life than they could have ever dreamed of for themselves. So I had some pretty negative conversations about what went on there for my father, who served in the Russian army, and for my mother, who wasn't allowed to go to university because they've already reached their quota on Jews.
This is a bit of an aside, but I just finished reading a book by Vasily Grossman, who was a war reporter for the in the Soviet, or I guess in the Red Army, but he was also a Ukrainian Jew, and the person who did the translation said that Grossman would never have been able to envisage a war between Ukrainians and the Russians, particularly due to Russian aggression. He was talking at the time about German aggression. Does that ring true to you, that those divisions weren't as stark when your parents were there?
I think that was a different time, and that's probably true for when they were there. That obviously has not been true since Putin came to power, and the Ukraine of when my parents left is not the Ukraine of today. So the world's changed a lot in the time that they've been here, and then in the time that they've become Canadians and raised us in Canada.
So you've been called a different type of Tory. What was it that first attracted you to Conservative politics?
I grew up in a mixed marriage. That's to say, my mom was a Liberal and my dad was a Conservative, and we had those conversations really young at the dinner table. My brother's a lot older than I am, so they never sort of brought down the level of conversation so I can understand. I just had to keep up, and it was always a good sparring match between them. And I sort of gravitated to the way that my father saw the world. More so than the Liberals, and I volunteered like many others who ended up as staffers and who ended up running afterwards when I was a teenager on a progressive Conservative provincial campaign. Not even a teenager.
Mm. And then, as a 24-year-old in 2008, you were working. Did you work on that campaign and then worked for Cannon and I think John Baird? Was that time working in government? I mean, it was a minority government. You were in government. Was that good preparation for what you're doing now?
Well, I think it taught me to exactly what I was getting into, and some would say, I did it anyway, knowing exactly what the role was, knowing exactly what the job was. But I got an amazing experience in my early 20s, and then went on to the private sector to get some different kinds of experiences in banking and in PR. So definitely prepared me for what's to come next. It certainly didn't prepare me for opposition and the role that I've taken on now at the request of the leader. Right.
Well, we'll come on to that. So you worked in the private sector, you worked in provincial election campaigns, and then you ran for the nomination in Thornhill 2 years ago, which was a contested nomination against the sitting MPP. So obviously not an easy shoe-in victory. But you managed to get the endorsement of Stephen Harper, among others, Poilievre, Rona Ambrose, Lisa Raitt. I mean, it was the Conservative Party is a coalition of different interests, and you seem to have had the support of pretty much all sides of that coalition. Is that it was a tough nomination, I guess, and has it helped you now?
You know what? It was a tough nomination for a lot of different reasons. I mean, I was so happy to have the support right across the board from every type of Tory that you can imagine, and a lot of support within the community of something different and something new, and of course, filling those shoes of Peter Kent, who was a great MP in the area for the 13 years. I knew that the nomination was going to be the hardest battle, and fighting it during COVID made it increasingly difficult because you couldn't go out and talk to people. It was night after night of cold calling people, trying to get them to join the party, buy a membership, and then vote for someone they had never even met yet.
Right. And then you get elected, and you're in the House, and you've only been in the House 6 weeks. And I was in the House this day, and it sticks out in my memory when Justin Trudeau was talking about the Conservative Party members during the convoys standing with people who were wearing swastikas in answer to a question from you, which I thought was about as tone deaf as he's ever been in the House of Commons. Was that a big moment for you?
Well, it was the moment that it was the moment where I could stand up for who I was, the family that I came from, the history of my ancestors, and I thought it was unbecoming of a prime minister of a G7 country to accuse anyone in the House of Commons of standing with swastikas or invoking Nazism in any other way than during the Holocaust.
Let's talk about the party. I saw yesterday, it kind of caught my eye. Brian Mulroney's former Chief of Staff, Hugh Segal, was writing in the Toronto Star, and he berated Pierre Poilievre's iteration of the Conservative Party for what he called its coyote approach to every issue. I don't think it was a compliment.
Okay.
And yesterday you came out and called the new Special Rapporteur, David Johnston, former Governor General appointed by Stephen Harper, as a Trudeau Foundation insider, which I think was unfair to Johnston, and it seemed to me to epitomise this coyote approach. Do you want to speak to that?
Well, look, I don't. I'm going to disagree with you on that because I think it's incumbent on the Prime Minister to name somebody that the Canadian population would see has no bias and no conflict whatsoever. And one of the things that we know about election interference and about the entire scandal that the Prime Minister has been running for weeks now is the $200,000 donation to the Trudeau Foundation. So why not find somebody who is not, personally a personal friend of the families or involved in the Trudeau Foundation? There are plenty of eminent Canadians. So this has nothing to do with the character of the former Governor General, and everything that it has to do with the confidence that the people should have in somebody who may or may not call for an inquiry. And by the way, I think at the end of the day, Conservatives will still call for that public inquiry. It is the only way to get to the bottom of this. So you and I can disagree on that, but I think the Prime Minister has put the Governor General for former Governor General in a rough spot, and I think it's incumbent on him to have not done that.
Do you have confidence in his ability, integrity to act in the national interest?
John, I think it's the wrong appointment, and I think that any doubt from Canadians, it's not going to matter what the decision is because we're already here. I think it's the wrong appointment. I think there is a right appointment, and I think at the end of the day, the only outcome that I think all parties would be satisfied with, and all Canadians as a result would be satisfied with, is a full, independent public inquiry.
Just to go back to the more general point about the tone of the Conservative Party at the moment, I mean, your leaders talked about there being no pivot away from the leadership campaign, which was a pretty angry sounding campaign. It decried elites, undermined confidence in institutions like the Bank of Canada, the Supreme Court, and sided with the Freedom Convoy. Do you think you can win power with those kind of uncompromising views which sees the electorate as either friend or foe? I think most people are neither, by the way.
Yeah, look, I think you've seen. The leader Pierre Poilievre in the same iteration of himself since the beginning of his election, and I think we're speaking to Canadians who have told us that they're struggling, that they're not able to get by, and I think it's going to be about offering them a plan and a vision and solutions. And what I do know is that things aren't working, and whether it's the cost of everything going up, the cost of housing doubling, a tripling of the carbon tax, increase in opioid deaths, all of these things are not working under the current regime. So it's incumbent on us to find the solutions, bring those solutions to Canadians in the next election, and truly oppose the government as an official opposition in a way that I don't think we've done in the past.
This is a related question. Are you looking to try and persuade disenchanted Liberals, especially around the big cities? I mean, you're in Toronto, that they should trust you, or is the goal more about motivating your voting base?
I think the goal is always both. Like, we do strategy and we don't talk about strategy, and I'm sure you can appreciate that over the years of covering Parliament Hill. But in terms of our message, is it resonating in urban centres? Yes. Is it resonating in and around me in the 905 in the Lower Mainland? Yes. We've seen we've seen that in the numbers. We've seen that in the attendance at political events. Call it if you compare where Pierre is on stage in a place like Hamilton, where we've had no hope in winning, where there's 1,200 people in the audience, or if you look at a town hall that was viewed by 128 people yesterday when I looked when the Prime Minister was out there, there's something going on here, and our coalition may not look like the traditional Conservative coalition, but it doesn't mean that people aren't going to look for an alternative when it comes to a better future and making sure that we live in a country where you can work hard and get ahead.
I mean, there's been precious little policy so far, which is not unusual for an opposition party at this stage in the game, I guess. But do you accept that some of that you've been guilty of offering simplistic solutions? The housing crisis, Wroxham Road, which is a very thorny, difficult issue, and downplaying the complicated trade-offs that are the inevitable consequence of being in government?
Yeah, look, governing is certainly difficult, but I don't think that being the official opposition, holding the government to account, asking the most powerful people in the country to answer questions, which, by the way, they answer none of, is outside of the realm of what we should be doing. And I think that you'll see a platform presented in the next election. But I think there has been some policies, some solutions. I think the leader's been clear on where he wants to go and what issues that he wants to tackle, and those are the exact same issues that Canadians are talking to us about. They don't come out of nowhere.
What do you make of the NDP deal? I mean, we're essentially talking election timing here, because essentially the NDP are going to decide on that, and they've sided with you on the public inquiry on foreign interference, but they remain joined at the hip with the Liberals on the confidence issues that matter. It doesn't look to me like it's going to unravel anytime soon.
Well, far be it for me to be able to explain to the strategy of the NDP, or if I was an NDP member, how to explain that to the constituents that elected them, or frankly how I would look at myself in the mirror every single day, knowing that you're propping up a government from one side of your mouth while you're dressing them down from the other on all kinds of things that you don't like. They're an opposition party too. They have a responsibility, and I think that that on this inquiry, if they're actually going to oppose the government and demand transparency, that they should probably follow through on that. But I'm not their strategist, nor am I a member.
Finally, just rounding up, time is not on the side of any government that's been around for 7 years. For the opposition, it's often enough just to provide a realistic alternative and not offend anybody. And yet, your party did exactly that. Offend people. in the last couple of weeks when 3 MPs sat down with a far-right German politician. Do you think you need to be better when it comes to reassuring Canadians and providing some internal discipline on these kind of things?
Yeah, look, I think the discipline has been there in terms of message, and I think that we've got to do a better job, certainly at vetting those things. But we're not going to let the government off the hook, and I'm not going to be lectured by a government that just gave $600,000 of taxpayer money to a guy like Laith Marouf. Lecture anybody about racism or anti-Semitism. We definitely have to be better, but we're going to take no lessons from the Liberals on that one.
All right. Well, listen, thanks very much for coming on. We appreciate it. We'll speak to you soon.
Thanks for having me, John.